Have you ever noticed how you make progress and then somehow undo it? You start strong, you feel focused, things begin to change, and then you slip. You procrastinate. You distract yourself. You stop showing up, and later you ask yourself the same painful question: why do I always ruin my own progress? Most people think self sabotage means a lack of discipline or self respect. They believe it comes from weakness or bad habits. But psychology tells a different story. Self sabotage is rarely about wanting to fail, it is about the brain trying to protect you. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, not successful. Progress often brings uncertainty. It changes routines, expectations, and identity, and to the brain, uncertainty feels like risk. So, when you move forward, your brain may quietly pull you back toward what feels familiar, even if that familiarity keeps you stuck. This is why self sabotage often appears right after progress, not before. Right when things start to improve, the brain interprets change as instability and it responds by creating resistance. Distraction, doubt, and delay are not random. They are signals meant to restore comfort. Understanding this changes everything because when you stop seeing self sabotage as self destruction and start seeing it as misplaced self protection, you stop fighting yourself. And that is where real change begins. Self sabotage is usually misunderstood as self hate or a lack of discipline, but psychology shows it is far more often a form of self protection. People do not sabotage their progress because they want to fail. They do it because their brain is trying to keep them safe from perceived threats. These threats are rarely physical. They are emotional, social, and identity based, but to the brain, they feel just as real. The brain's primary job is survival. Long before modern life existed, survival depended on avoiding danger, conserving energy, and staying within familiar patterns can unfamiliar carried risk. New environments, new roles, or new behaviors could lead to rejection, failure, or harm. Because of this, the brain learned to prefer what was known over what was better. That preference did not disappear just because life became more comfortable. When you start making progress, something important happens internally. Your routines change. Your identity begins to shift. Expectations rise. Other people may start noticing. All of this creates uncertainty. Even positive change can feel destabilizing to the brain. From its perspective, stability is safety, and safety matters more than improvement. This is why self sabotage often appears after momentum begins. At the start, there is excitement and novelty. But as progress becomes real, the brain starts calculating risk. What if you fail publicly? What if people expect more from you? What if success leads to pressure you cannot handle? What if you lose the comfort of your old identity? These questions rarely appear as clear thoughts. They appear as resistance. That resistance can take many forms: procrastination, distraction, perfectionism, sudden loss of motivation, self doubt, or impulsive behavior. Each of these behaviors serves the same purpose. They slow you down, they pull you back toward what feels familiar, they reduce the emotional risk of continuing forward. From the outside, this looks like self sabotage. From the inside, it feels like relief. The brain is especially sensitive to loss. Psychological research shows that loss feels stronger than gain. Losing comfort, predictability, or belonging can feel more painful than gaining success feels rewarding. So when progress threatens something familiar, the brain reacts defensively. It does not ask whether the threat is logical. It reacts based on feeling. Self sabotage is also linked to identity protection. If you have spent years seeing yourself a certain way, change can feel threatening. Improvement challenges the story you tell yourself about who you are. If that story has provided emotional safety, even if it is limiting, the brain will defend it. Staying the same feels safer than becoming someone new. This is why people sometimes sabotage success more than failure. Failure confirms expectations. Success disrupts them. When success begins to rewrite identity, the brain may attempt to restore balance by pulling behavior back toward the familiar self. This is not weakness. It is consistency seeking. Another layer of self protection comes from emotional exposure. Progress increases visibility. It opens the door to judgment, criticism, and comparison. The brain is deeply social. It evolved in groups where rejection could be dangerous. Even today, social threat activates stress responses. When moving forward increases the chance of being seen or evaluated, the brain may trigger avoidance to reduce that risk. Many people learned early in life that effort does not always lead to safety. If someone experienced criticism, pressure, or punishment when trying, their brain may associate effort with threat. Later in life, when they try to grow, that old association activates. The brain attempts to protect them by slowing progress, even when the environment is no longer dangerous. Self sabotage can also protect against disappointment. Hope creates vulnerability. When you invest in something, you risk being let down. By sabotaging progress, the brain limits emotional exposure. If you never fully commit, you never fully lose. This pattern keeps pain predictable, which feels safer than uncertain outcomes. Understanding self sabotage as protection removes shame from the process. Shame tells the brain that something is wrong, which increases stress and strengthens avoidance. Uh, when people judge themselves harshly, they unknowingly reinforce the very pattern they want to stop. Self protection becomes more aggressive under threat. When self sabotage is recognized as a protective response, the solution changes. Instead of forcing change, the focus shifts to safety. Progress becomes something the nervous system must trust. This trust is built gradually. Small steps reduce perceived risk. Consistency teaches the brain that effort does not lead to harm. Over time, resistance softens. Awareness is critical because self sabotage operates automatically. The brain reacts faster than conscious thought. When you can observe resistance without identifying with it, you create space. You stop asking what is wrong with you and start asking what your brain is trying to protect you from. This shift does not eliminate self sabotage instantly, it changes your relationship with it. Resistance becomes information, not failure. Each time you move forward gently instead of aggressively, the brain updates its expectations. Safety increases, the need for protection decreases, self sabotage fades not when you attack it, but when the brain learns that progress is not dangerous. This learning happens through experience, not logic. Every time you continue despite discomfort and nothing bad happens, the brain recalibrates. Over time, what once felt threatening begins to feel normal, and the behaviors that once held you back lose their purpose because the brain no longer believes it needs to protect you from your own growth. The brain resists progress when it feels unsafe or uncertain, and this resistance is not a flaw but a built in survival mechanism. From an evolutionary perspective, the brain evolved in environments where change often meant danger. Stability meant predictability, and predictability increased the chances of survival. Even though modern life is very different, the brain still uses the same ancient rules to decide what feels safe. Progress almost always involves uncertainty. When you try to improve your life, you step into situations where outcomes are unknown. You do not fully know how people will respond, whether your effort will succeed, or how your daily life will change. To the brain, uncertainty is a signal that something could go wrong. It does not wait for proof, it reacts preemptively. This is why growth often feels uncomfortable, even when it is positive. Learning new skills, changing routines, or taking on responsibility disrupts what the brain has already mapped as familiar. The brain prefers patterns it understands. Familiar patterns require less energy and carry fewer surprises. When progress disrupts these patterns, the brain increases resistance to restore balance. The brain uses emotional signals to guide behavior. Anxiety, boredom, fatigue, and doubt are not random experiences, they are messages. When the brain senses uncertainty, it often generates discomfort to discourage forward movement. This discomfort can feel like a lack of motivation, but it is actually a protective brake. Safety for the brain is not just physical, emotional safety matters deeply. Social approval, predictability, and identity stability all contribute to the feeling of being safe. Progress can threaten each of these. Becoming better at something may change how others see you. It may create expectations or competition. It may separate you from familiar social roles. The brain interprets these shifts as risks to belonging. Belonging has always been essential to survival. In early human history, being excluded from the group could be life threatening. As a result, the brain is highly sensitive to anything that might affect social standing. When progress puts you in a position to be judged or evaluated, the brain may resist to protect against possible rejection. Uncertainty also affects the brain's stress system. When outcomes are unclear, stress hormones increase. This narrows attention and favors short term comfort over long term goals. The brain becomes more reactive and less reflective. In this state, habits and impulses feel stronger than intention. This explains why people often abandon goals when things become challenging rather than at the beginning. At first, the brain tolerates novelty, but as uncertainty accumulates, the stress response increases. If the brain does not yet trust the new path, it attempts to pull behavior back toward familiar ground. The brain also tracks energy expenditure. Change requires effort. Effort signals energy loss. In uncertain situations, the brain becomes conservative with energy. It discourages effort until it believes the investment is safe. This can show up as tiredness or procrastination that feels real, not imagined. Another important factor is prediction. The brain constantly predicts outcomes to guide action. When entering new territory, predictions become less accurate. Prediction errors increase. This creates discomfort. The brain prefers environments where it can predict what will happen next. Progress disrupts these predictions, increasing mental strain. Over time, repeated uncertainty without reassurance can teach the brain to associate progress with stress. If someone has tried and failed before, the brain may generalize that experience. It becomes more sensitive to uncertainty and quicker to resist. This is not pessimism. It is learning based on past outcomes. The brain is also influenced by emotional memory. Emotional experiences are stored with strong weight. If previous attempts at growth led to embarrassment, criticism, or disappointment, those memories can activate when progress begins again. The brain does not distinguish between past and present threat very well. It reacts as if the old danger is still possible. This reaction often happens below conscious awareness. You may not think about the past, but your body responds. Heart rate changes. Focus shifts. Avoidance feels appealing. These responses happen before reasoning has a chance to intervene. Certainty brings relief. This is why people gravitate toward routines, even unhelpful ones. Routines provide clear expectations. The brain knows what will happen. Even if the outcome is unsatisfying, it is predictable. Progress removes that certainty temporarily, creating emotional discomfort. The brain's resistance is not permanent, it changes with experience. When uncertainty is paired with safety repeatedly, the brain updates its predictions. What once felt risky becomes familiar. The stress response decreases, resistance softens. This is why gradual exposure works better than sudden change. Small steps reduce uncertainty. Each successful experience provides evidence that progress does not lead to harm. Over time, the brain recalibrates what it considers safe. When people try to force change aggressively, they often increase uncertainty. Pressure amplifies stress. The brain interprets urgency as danger. This strengthens resistance. In contrast, patience and consistency build trust. Understanding that resistance comes from uncertainty changes how you approach growth. Instead of asking why you are not motivated, you ask what feels unsafe. Instead of pushing harder, you create stability around change. Safety can be created through structure. Clear plans reduce uncertainty. Support reduces social threat. Self-compassion reduces emotional risk. These factors signal to the brain that progress is manageable. When the brain feels safe, motivation returns naturally. Motivation is not the cause of action. It is the result of perceived safety. When uncertainty decreases, energy becomes available again. Progress becomes sustainable when the brain learns that new paths are not dangerous. This learning does not happen through logic or self-criticism. It happens through repeated experience of moving forward and remaining safe. As safety increases, resistance decreases. What once felt heavy begins to feel neutral. What once triggered avoidance begins to feel normal. The brain adapts not by understanding change, but by surviving it without negative consequences until uncertainty no longer signals threat. Comfort and familiarity often feel safer than growth, not because growth is harmful, but because the brain is wired to prefer what it already understands. Familiar patterns require less effort to process. The brain knows what to expect, how to respond, and how to recover. Growth, on the other hand, introduces new variables. New variables increase uncertainty, and uncertainty activates the brain's protective systems. Comfort is not the same as happiness, but the brain often treats it as more valuable. Comfort signals stability. It suggests that the environment is predictable and manageable. From an evolutionary perspective, predictability increased survival. When outcomes were known, energy could be conserved and threats could be anticipated. This preference for predictability still shapes behavior today. Familiar routines create a sense of control. Even when those routines are limiting or unsatisfying, they provide clear boundaries. The brain understands the rules. Growth disrupts these rules. It demands adaptation. Adaptation requires effort, attention, and emotional exposure. The brain resists these demands when it does not see immediate safety. Many people confuse comfort with laziness, but comfort seeking is a biological strategy. The brain naturally seeks states that minimize risk and energy expenditure. Growth often requires short, short-term discomfort for long-term gain. The brain discounts long-term benefits when short-term comfort is threatened. This is not a moral failure. It is how the brain prioritizes survival. Familiarity also reinforces identity. People build stories about who they are based on repeated behavior. These stories provide coherence. When growth challenges these stories, it creates internal conflict. The brain prefers consistency. It would rather maintain a familiar identity than risk the uncertainty of becoming someone new. This is why people often return to old habits during stress. Stress increases the brain's reliance on familiar patterns. Under pressure, the brain defaults to what it knows best. Growth behaviors, which are still unfamiliar, feel fragile. Comfort behaviors feel reliable. The environment also reinforces comfort. Social systems reward predictability. People often receive validation for staying consistent rather than for changing. Growth can alter social dynamics. It may challenge relationships or expectations. The brain anticipates these changes and resists to protect social stability. Comfort reduces cognitive load. When behaviors are habitual, they require less conscious effort. Growth requires attention and decision making. Decision making consumes energy. When the brain is already managing daily demands, it may resist adding more complexity. Familiar discomfort can feel preferable to unfamiliar possibility. This seems irrational, but it makes sense neurologically. Known discomfort has limits. The brain understands how bad it gets and how long it lasts. Unknown outcomes have no clear boundaries. The brain treats unknown risk as potentially worse than known pain. This explains why people stay in situations that do not serve them. The familiarity provides psychological safety. Growth threatens that safety by introducing uncertainty. Even positive outcomes feel risky when the path is unclear. Comfort is reinforced by reward systems. Immediate comfort provides immediate relief. Growth often delays reward. The brain is more sensitive to immediate feedback than delayed benefits. Comfort behaviors provide quick signals of safety. Growth behaviors may not provide immediate reassurance. Over time, comfort can become a trap. The brain confuses safety with stagnation. It protects the individual from imagined threats while preventing real improvement. This is not intentional. The brain does not evaluate fulfillment, it evaluates risk. The longer someone stays within familiar patterns, the stronger those patterns become. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Growth behaviors, practiced less often, remain weaker. This imbalance makes comfort even more attractive. Change feels harder not because it is impossible, but because it is less practiced. Fear often disguises itself as preference. People say they prefer comfort, but what they are really responding to is reduced anxiety. Growth increases anxiety initially. The brain interprets this as a signal to stop. Without understanding this mechanism, people assume something is wrong with them. Comfort also promotional regulation. Familiar activities can soothe stress. Growth, growth activities may increase emotional intensity. Until the brain learns to tolerate that intensity, it will favor comfort. The idea that comfort is the enemy oversimplifies the issue. Comfort is not bad. It becomes limiting when it replaces growth entirely. The brain needs periods of safety to recover. Problems arise when safety becomes avoidance. Growth requires redefining safety. Safety must be associated not just with familiarity, but with capability. When the brain learns that it can handle discomfort and uncertainty, growth begins to feel safer. This learning happens through experience. Each time someone steps slightly outside comfort and survives, the brain updates its expectations. The discomfort becomes less intense. The unfamiliar becomes familiar. People often wait to feel ready before growing. The brain rarely provides that signal. Readiness emerges after exposure, not before. Comfort must be challenged gently, not violently. When growth is approached gradually, the brain adapts. What once felt threatening becomes neutral. Comfort expands rather than collapses. The familiar grows larger. Understanding the role of comfort removes self-blame. Resistance is not laziness. It is the brain doing what it evolved to do. Growth becomes possible when comfort is used as a base, not a cage. The goal is not to eliminate comfort, but to expand what feels comfortable. Each small act of growth teaches the brain that safety exists beyond the familiar. Over time, the brain stops equating comfort with stagnation and starts associating safety with movement, learning, and capability. Fear of loss is stronger than the desire for gain, and this imbalance plays a powerful role in why people sabotage their own progress. The human brain is wired to prioritize avoiding loss over achieving improvement. This tendency is not a mindset problem, but a survival adaptation. In early environments, losing food, shelter, or social support could be fatal, while gaining extra resources offered only marginal benefit. As a result, the brain learned to treat loss as more urgent than opportunity. This wiring still shapes behavior today. When people consider change, their brain does not simply weigh what they might gain, it focuses intensely on what could be lost. uh, Comfort, time, identity, relationships, predictability, and emotional stability all register as valuable resources. Progress threatens these resources, even if the threat is imagined or exaggerated. When someone starts improving their life, the brain immediately scans for potential losses. What if I lose my free time? What if I lose the approval of others? What if I lose the version of myself that feels familiar? What if I lose control? These thoughts often stay below conscious awareness, but they shape emotional responses. The pain of potential loss feels more intense than the pleasure of potential success. This imbalance makes staying the same feel safer than moving forward. Even when the reward is meaningful, the brain magnifies the cost. This is why people hesitate even when opportunities are clearly beneficial. Loss is also tied to identity. Growth can mean letting go of old narratives. Someone who improves must abandon the comfort of certain excuses or roles. This loss of identity feels threatening. The brain treats identity as a protective structure. Anything that weakens it triggers resistance. Fear of loss also explains why people quit when progress begins to work. As improvement becomes real, the stakes increase, success raises expectations, expectations increase the cost of failure. The brain anticipates this and may choose to stop early to avoid a more painful loss later. There is also the fear of losing emotional safety. Progress requires vulnerability. Vulnerability exposes a person to judgment and disappointment. The brain prefers emotional certainty, even if that certainty includes dissatisfaction. Uncertain hope feels riskier than familiar frustration. Loss aversion is especially strong when outcomes are uncertain. The brain overestimates negative outcomes and underestimates positive ones. This bias makes action feel dangerous. The safest option appears to be inaction. People often misinterpret this hesitation as laziness or lack of ambition. In reality, the brain is making a protective calculation. It is choosing to avoid perceived loss rather than pursue uncertain gain. Fear of loss also reinforces procrastination. Delaying action postpones the moment of risk. The brain experiences relief by avoiding immediate threat. This relief reinforces avoidance even though it creates long-term regret. Past experiences amplify this effect. If someone has experienced loss after trying before, the brain remembers. Emotional memory strengthens loss aversion. The brain becomes quicker to avoid situations that resemble past pain. Social loss is particularly powerful. Humans evolved to survive in groups. Losing social approval once meant danger. Today, the fear remains growth can separate someone from peers or challenge group norms. Uh, the brain resists to preserve belonging. Even success can feel like loss. Success can change relationships, routines, and expectations. The brain does not distinguish between good and bad change. It reacts to change itself as a risk. This is why people sometimes self-sabotage right before a breakthrough. The closer success gets, the more intense the fear of losing what feels safe. The brain steps in to restore equilibrium. Understanding this mechanism reduces self-judgment. People are not weak for hesitating. They are human. The brain is responding to perceived threat, not truth. Overcoming fear of loss does not mean ignoring it. It means acknowledging it and reducing perceived risk. Small steps lower the sense of loss. Gradual change teaches the brain that loss does not occur. When the brain learns that progress does not destroy safety, the fear softens. Gains begin to feel possible. Loss no longer dominates the decision-making process. Growth becomes sustainable when the brain trusts that what is gained will not cost everything else. That trust develops through experience, not force. As perceived loss decreases, motivation increases. The brain releases energy when it no longer feels threatened. Progress feels lighter, not because the fear is gone, but because it no longer controls behavior. Awareness is the first step to breaking self-sabotage patterns because self-sabotage operates largely outside conscious control. The brain makes decisions long before the conscious mind is aware of them. Emotions, impulses, and avoidance behaviors often appear suddenly, giving the illusion that they are random or uncontrollable. In reality, they are automatic responses shaped by past learning and perceived threat. When people are unaware of these patterns, they identify with them. A thought like, I don't feel motivated, is treated as truth rather than a signal. Behavior follows the signal automatically. Awareness creates distance between the signal and the response. This distance is small, but it is powerful. Self-sabotage thrives in unconsciousness. The brain prefers efficiency. It relies on shortcuts and habits to reduce effort. Without awareness, these shortcuts run unchecked. Awareness interrupts this automation. It brings unconscious processes into conscious attention where choice becomes possible. Awareness does not mean analysis or judgment. It means noticing. Noticing when resistance appears. Noticing when avoidance feels attractive. Noticing emotional shifts without immediately reacting. This noticing activates different brain systems than those used in automatic behavior. When awareness increases, the brain slows down. Slowing down reduces emotional intensity. This gives the nervous system time to regulate. Regulation makes it easier to tolerate discomfort without escaping it. Many people try to eliminate self-sabotage through willpower. Willpower is limited. It works best when the brain feels safe. Awareness reduces the need for willpower by reducing threat perception. When you understand why resistance appears, it loses some of its power. Awareness also changes the internal narrative. Instead of saying, I always mess things up, the narrative becomes, my brain is trying to protect me. This reframing reduces shame. Shame activates threat systems. Reducing shame lowers resistance. Self-sabotage often hides behind rationalization. The mind creates reasons to avoid discomfort. Awareness exposes these reasons without arguing with them. You see the pattern instead of believing the story. Awareness increases emotional tolerance. When you notice discomfort without escaping it, the brain learns that discomfort is survivable. Each moment of awareness builds capacity. Capacity reduces the need for avoidance. The brain updates its predictions by experience. Awareness allows new experiences to occur. Without awareness, behavior repeats automatically. With awareness, new responses become possible. Awareness also improves self-regulation. You cannot regulate what you cannot observe. Observation creates feedback. Feedback allows adjustment. Adjustment leads to change. Breaking self-sabotage is not about eliminating discomfort. It is about changing your relationship with it. Awareness makes discomfort informative rather than overwhelming. Awareness does not require insight into the past. It requires attention in the present. Noticing the urge to stop. Noticing the urge to distract, noticing the moment when momentum fades, these moments are opportunities. Each noticed urge is a chance to choose differently. Even choosing the same behavior with awareness weakens the automatic loop. Over time, awareness reshapes neural pathways. The brain learns that impulses do not require action. This learning increases self-control without force. Awareness also builds trust. When you respond to yourself with curiosity instead of judgment, the brain feels safer. Safety reduces resistance. Resistance fades. Awareness allows progress to be paced appropriately. When you notice overwhelm, you can slow down instead of quitting. This prevents collapse. People often expect awareness to produce instant change. Change is gradual. Awareness creates conditions for change rather than forcing outcomes. The brain learns through repetition. Each moment of awareness is a repetition of presence. Over time, presence becomes a habit. Self-sabotage loses its grip when it is seen clearly. What is seen cannot control in the same way. Awareness shines light on patterns that depend on invisibility. Awareness also reconnects action with intention. Without awareness, intention is overridden by impulse. With awareness, intention regains influence. The goal is not perfection or responsiveness. Awareness allows you to respond instead of react. As awareness grows, identity shifts. You no longer see yourself as someone who self-sabotages. You see yourself as someone who notices, learns, and adjusts. This identity change reduces fear. Reduced fear reduces sabotage. The cycle unwinds naturally. Breaking self-sabotage does not require fixing yourself. It requires understanding yourself. Awareness is the doorway through which understanding enters, and once understanding is present, the patterns that once ran your behavior begin to loosen their grip, not because they are fought, but because they are no longer needed. Self-sabotage is not proof that you are broken, lazy, or lacking willpower. It is proof that your brain is doing what it evolved to do, protect you from perceived risk. The problem is not that your brain is wrong, but that it is outdated. It uses ancient rules to judge modern situations, and those rules prioritize safety over growth. Once you understand this, the entire story changes. You stop fighting yourself and start working with yourself. You stop demanding motivation and start building safety. You stop asking why you fail and start noticing when your brain feels threatened. That shift alone weakens the cycle. Progress does not come from crushing resistance. It comes from understanding it. Every moment of awareness teaches your brain something new, that discomfort is not danger, that uncertainty is survivable, that effort does not equal harm. Over time, your brain updates its predictions. What once felt threatening becomes neutral. What once triggered avoidance becomes manageable. This is how change actually happens, not through force, but through repeated evidence, not through self criticism, but through curiosity. When your brain no longer needs to protect you from growth, self sabotage loses its purpose. And the most important truth is this: you are not sabotaging because you are weak. You are sabotaging because you care, because your brain wants to keep you safe. When you respect that instinct instead of fighting it, you gain something far more powerful than motivation. You gain alignment. And when your biology and your goals stop fighting each other, progress stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a natural next step.